Hey guys, David from the Modern Martial Artist here. So I've decided to do one striking thoughts a week, simply because I liked doing one at a time, like per fight, better because it was more specific to what people wanted. But the YouTube algorithm saw that it wasn't getting, saw multiple videos in a row not getting as many views as the fight breakdowns, which of course they don't. It's a podcast versus an actual technique breakdown or a fight breakdown, but it saw too many of those in a row, and so it started not showing anyone when I did a fight breakdown too. So that's a bummer because I like doing them separately, but there are timestamps, so you could just go to the timestamp listed below, and that'll take you to the fight that you want to hear about or talk about. If you're only interested in boxing, you could go to the boxing. If you're only interested in MMA, you could go to MMA. And this is going to come out every Sunday, I've decided. So every Sunday, it'll be really cool, actually, I think, is that I'll start off with the fights that happened over the weekend. It just kind of give my thoughts on some interesting stuff that happened with the fights and what the fighters did. And then I'll go into upcoming fights, so you guys are prepared. You know what to look for, what fights are upcoming, and I'll just kind of break down those as they come up. So every Sunday, I'm thinking around 5 p.m. So noon to 5, you'll get a podcast. So starting off with Daniel Jacobs versus Sulecki. This was a really good fight, like a really good fight. Not amazing, but really decent, and it was very enjoyable from the very beginning. I felt both competitors were very intelligent, as well as both of them being very aggressive, and like nobody quit, and it was a hard fight. You didn't see anyone kind of fade due to cardio or due to, I mean, a little bit last round. Obviously, it's going 12 rounds, but even then they were throwing, just catch your breath throw, catch your breath throw. So I'm just gonna kind of start at the beginning because it was a really great fight. Sulecki has great head movement is the first thing I want to say, and it's kind of interesting because there's such stylistic differences between fighters, even when it comes to something as obscure as head movement. It's like, so often nowadays I see the jerky, side to side, slip, and then slip, and then just kind of circle, or slip, duck, pull, just very like jerky motion, 1-2, following the punches of the opponent. And what Muhammad Ali did, and what a lot of old timey boxers did, is they just kept the movement circular, and you saw Groves do that against Eubank a lot, and it really works very well. It's just like, instead of going from side to side, you just kind of, even if you're slipping to the right, pulling, and then slip back, and then slip to the left, it's like one circular motion, and it just makes the guy miss so much more and gets him so much off balance, and it just looks smoother to me for some reason. And Sulecki was really good at that at the beginning of the round. He had really great smooth head movement, and I feel it transfers to punches better because you're not just needing to stop and rebrace. You can, just like reverse the movement of your body. You could just kind of circle in and out, and then just load up on your punch from it. So he was doing really good with that. He had really good broken rhythm. He was setting up his jabs nicely. He was landing with his twos a lot. And he was really good at countering and even intercepting at time. He even realized that Jacobs was framing off of him when they were infighting, when they were up close. Jacobs was resting his head on his shoulder, and he stuck his elbow out to frame and block any potential counters, and it just kind of like it pushed his opponent, pushed Sulecki's head up because he wanted to go for a right. And also could just kind of neutralize his right hand at the same time. And then Sulecki saw him doing that, and then slipped the right that was coming and hit him with the right of his own, which was really high-level stuff. So I was really impressed with him. Jacobs, for his part, in the first couple rounds, because Sulecki looked the best during this fight in the first couple rounds, Jacobs realized that Sulecki was a taller opponent who stood upright and kept a high guard. So all those things really meant one thing, really, which is that you want to go to the body. So he started landing some really nice body shots, but Sulecki was keeping his hands high even with the body shots, and he was wasn't really able to connect with the head very much at all. He also tried a number of like Roy Jones Jr. coming with the lead, leading with your cross, and then just kind of sliding your rear foot forward and shuffling out at a 45-degree angle, which looked impressive, but really wasn't landing too much. So the first couple rounds of this fight, more the first one looked more like Sulecki, and then the second one looked kind of even. And I'm like, wow, I wasn't expecting this. And Sulecki was kind of like was really impressing me with all of this. Daniel started employing new forms of defense. Before he was moving, but it wasn't really effective, and just basic high guard, head movement. And Sulecki was still landing with some pretty hard punches. I was surprised at Jacobs' ability to take those shots. Either Sulecki doesn't have a whole lot of power behind him, or Jacobs has just an insane jaw to be able to take that. Maybe he was rolling with it, but he started doing these great shoulder rolls, and then immediately following up. And that's like when it gets really good, right? Is when it lasts a long time. So it wasn't just like one guy comes in, boom, boom, other guy dodges, then he comes in, wait a couple seconds, he comes in. It was like back and forth. It was this great back and forth between them, which was really awesome. I still felt like Sulecki was getting kind of the better of the exchanges through like if I'm remembering correctly, up until like the third or fourth, but then he was doing a better job cutting off the ring, and he wasn't landing as much, but the shots he was landing looked harder and cleaner to me, even though Jacobs was landing a little bit more. And so Sulecki did a good job cutting off the ring, but then Daniel started using this stance-changing footwork, or not Daniel's, Daniel Jacobs. Jacobs started using this the stance switching footwork to kind of evade him, which was really like high level and pretty awesome. So like Sulecki would like try to corner him, and then what Jacobs would do is he'd shift back and turn, so it was like a shifting shoulder roll. If he'd get him against a corner, and Jacobs was in like a orthodox stance with his left foot forward, he would step back, so now he's in southpaw, and then pivot off of his step back, so now he's in southpaw pivoting, and shoulder roll with his elbow out, and evade blows that way, and escape the corner that way. So that was really high level, which was really cool. And he started using these shifting rolls going forward and backwards, and then he started getting offensive with it. So like he'd step to the side and transition from southpaw to orthodox, and I'm like, man, this is really old-timey stuff, or modern MMA, whichever take your pick. It's really interesting to see just kind of this old-timey boxing techniques transferring to MMA. And then I don't know if it's all the footage available online now of old fighters, or if it's the techniques getting repopularized in mixed martial arts. But these new age boxers are seeing this somewhere, and they're incorporating it into their own game, which is really impressive and really cool to see that it still works, because it'd been assumed that it just didn't work as well due to the bigger gloves, or that, well, basically that's it, just due to bigger, more padded gloves. But man, it's some really old techniques are coming back. And Jacobs was doing a great job offensively, and with switching stances in these exchanges to get superior angles. It was really impressive. And then Jacobs changed kind of from in the first couple of rounds he was going for the head first, and then going to the body, and he was just scoring some body shots with that, and that was working okay. And then he changed. He changed. Oh, I'm sorry. He was going from body to head, and then he changed from going from head to body, which would get Sulecki to kind of just raise his guard even more. And what that did is it let Jacobs get in closer, and once he gets in closer, you could just kind of shoeshine it. And so he started doing that, just boom, 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 all the way to the side, while he knew that Sulecki was just kind of had his guard up, and did great with that. Round 5 was epic. I really liked it. So much back and forth. Jacob's corner said to kind of bully Sulecki. So basically, just like keep coming forward with them, because he said that he wasn't countering well, he wasn't giving anything back, which I think obviously it worked out well for the fight. But while doing this in round 5, Jacobs took some big shots, and the reason is because like his corner was totally right, in that Sulecki wasn't able to effectively avoid punches and counter, but he was wrong in the fact that he was completely able to counter after taking a shot. And I felt this is actually what won Jacobs the fight, is that Jacobs was able to effectively deflect or evade or slip all these punches, not all of them, but a good deal of them, and then counter and land his own. Whereas Sulecki, he'd block some or he'd evade some, but when it came to longer exchanges, he could give shots back, but it was only after he'd already taken some. So, in other words, Jacobs was able to completely avoid most of the punches, whereas Sulecki was able to land harder, I felt most of the time, harder shots, but he'd already taken 2 punches for every one that he was giving, or potentially more. So, Sulecki has some potential, man. He's got really good foundations, and it's always impressive when you see a guy take a shot and then give one right back, no hesitation. Like, it doesn't even register in their head that they just got hit. So he had difficulty countering. Sulecki had difficulty countering off of effective defense, whereas Johnson, and the announcers were kind of pointing this out too. Johnson was using cross blocks at one point. I was like, okay, yeah, he is using cross blocks. They compared him to Archie Moore, and I'm like, yeah, that's not an apt comparison yet, though. But then he went full Archie Moore for a second, total cross block while he was weaving in like a figure 8 motion, flaring his elbows to pick off shots. I'm like, okay, there's Archie Moore. He's definitely been studying Archie Moore, and it worked really well for him, and he was able to throw punches off of that cross guard effectively. And back to my point before, I felt that's what won him the fight. He had effective defense with counters, whereas Sulecki could land those hard shots, but only after taking a few. So yeah, that was 7 and 8 when he was employing those cross guards, and I thought that man, it was just great. Sulecki landed some hard shots still, but not a whole lot. So if you're going to do that, you need to land hard enough to knock the guy out, or you need to throw a lot more so more of those land. And neither of those was happening. And I think he was probably slowed down a lot by the body shots. I think they were probably paying off by round 7 or 8. So at this point, probably also because of the body shots, Sulecki lowered his guard to protect his body. He still kept it by his chin, but it wasn't like as much of a high guard. And it actually worked better for him. For a couple rounds, because he just used his guard to protect his body, and then head movement. I mentioned before he had good head movement. I think he might want to actually start relying more on that than a high guard and keep his hands low. And it also, throwing from a high guard is kind of awkward. Especially if your hands are like really high. You have to kind of. I mean, there are ways to do it. You can leverage your weight down into it for your jab, and Triple G's really, really good at that, landing from high guard with his jab. But it's kind of hard to get. Your hands aren't really as loose, and you're not flowing, and your hips can't go into it as much. So once Sulecki kind of lowered his guard, I felt like he was looser. He was able to see better, and I think that was actually working out better for him. So maybe a stylistic change. So basically, at the end of the fight, I think was it the 12th? It wasn't the 11th. It was the 12th. Jacobs actually scored a knockdown, which was really good. It was basically he beat Sulecki to the punch. Sulecki was throwing wide. Jacobs was in tight. I think it was like a right hook, like a really tight one. Elbow in, that circular motion with your hand, and he knocked him down. But what was awesome is that besides the knockout was really awesome. Sulecki got right back up and tried to knock him out. And the both of them, although they seemed tired, they take like 5 to 10 second breaks between exchanges. They'd get right back to trying to knock the other person down. Jacobs, because he knew he won the fight and he wanted it on his highlight reel, and and to be, and to just go for it because he's a competitor and he wants to fight the best. And Sulecki, because he knew he'd probably lost and he wanted to tag him back. So amazing fight. Sulecki was a class act, clapping for him at the end. Jacobs put on a great performance, showing some new stuff, showing that he was tough, that he could take it to another level, showing his speed, showing the cross guard and head movement and the shifting. So, and I think Jacobs has potential to get better, and I think he is getting better. His performance against Triple G was pretty damn good, considering how insane, Triple G is. And, that's all I have to say about that fight. Great fight, and I look forward to whoever either of these guys are fighting next. Hopefully Sulecki gets a big name to fight next, and I'm sure Jacobs will. So, all right, so Fedor versus Mir was a very short fight, very exciting. So, Mir started off, he caught Fedor with, I think, a cross or like a looping hook, and then sent him down to the ground. And I'm like, oh shit, here we go again, But Fedor got back up, and Mir decided to get double underhooks, maybe just to kind of like keep him there. Maybe he wanted to slam him again, take him down to the ground. Not sure, but either way, Fedor beautifully just stepped his foot in, leveraged him over his hips, got his hook in there, and then just threw him down to the ground. And then they were both back on their feet. And I'm like, oh shit, he doesn't look rocked at all. He doesn't look like he was down on the ground just a few seconds ago. And so then obviously Fedor needs to show the Mir that he's a threat. So he comes in with the cross and kind of loops underneath, trying to clinch, trying to get a good hold on him. He doesn't get the underhook. He gets one, but he doesn't get that underhook he likes to do with the cross to underhook. Instead, he ends up with one over, one under, and lands some nice knees to the body. So that was cool. And then they're both back in the ring. And Fedor starts... This is where, like, experience comes in. Because, unless your memory starts to go, obviously, or your body just stops cooperating, your experience is going to be what wins you the fights when you're an older fighter. And he's, like, 41 now. So that and power is the last two things to leave. Like, your speed goes... your reactions go, but your power and your is still there, and all the wisdom and experience you gained is still there. So Fedor starts to kind of negotiate distance, I should say, with Mir, in that he's stepping in and jabbing and then pulling back, trying to draw a counter, and he really gets a counter. He gets a bunch of counters. So Mir just comes in swinging wild, and Fedor's managing his distance beautifully, stepping in just enough to tempt him and then stepping back out, and he's fighting backwards. And I think he caught Mir while he was charging in with first a tight hook and then a cross, and then he sidestepped beautifully to take that superior angle for an upper and just sent Mir to the canvas, and he was just done. So, I mean, that's such a good strategy. His back was nearly against the cage, and he stepped to the side, and for some reason that uppercut from the side is just, it can be so devastating. Maybe it's because the opponent doesn't see it coming. Maybe it's just at like a better position to leverage an uppercut, because I don't know if this is a problem for everyone, but for me, uppercuts have been some of the hardest things for me to gain power on. Even knowing like the right way to do it, even knowing how to put your hips into it, and rather than rise up, kind of, push the hips forward, coming up the center line. The right way to retract it, the different ways to retract it. One circular like a hook, one kind of like a up version of a jab or a cross, in like a straight line like a shovel. I know how to do this shit, but for me, it's always been the hardest punch to put any amount of power into, personally. But for some reason, that side angle, just every time I see an upper landed from that side angle, coming through the opponent's guard sideways instead of straight up into the chin, I don't know if it's better for power or if it's better, just a better angle to hit at. But man, it's devastating almost every single time. Yeah, and Lomachenko's obviously had a lot of success with getting that angle, that outside angle, and then coming in sideways with the uppercut. Although he usually throws it to the body, but he's landed some nice shots to the head too with that. So yeah, great fight. It's a tournament, so I'm expecting it to fully be like what was the name of that Van Damme movie? I'm expecting, after seeing all the fights last night, I'm expecting it to be on, is it Bloodsport? I'm expecting it to be on par with Bloodsport after seeing all the fights last night, and I can't wait for Fedor to advance through that. And yeah, so that's all I have to say about that. Let's move on to the fights that are upcoming this week. I think there's only one that's worth mentioning. All right, so I'm just as bummed as everyone else that we won't be seeing Triple G versus Canelo on the 5th. I wanted to go over his new opponent. I've heard his name pronounced two ways by different announcers. I've watched 2 or 3 of his fights just to kind of prepare myself and kind of tell you guys about what to expect for his fight versus Triple G and what kind of fighter he is. So his name is either Martirosyan or Martirosyan. I'm not sure which it is, but I'm going to call it Martirosyan just because I think it sounds cooler. So, whatever, fight me. So, this guy has a decent record. Every time he's gone, he's tried for 2 middleweight belts, so he's good enough to have gotten a chance at them. But he did not do enough on either attempt to secure the belt. So, I mean, as far as just fighters in general, yeah, he's good, you know, enough to do that. He's up there. But as far as Triple G goes, I mean, I just think this guy's gonna die. Not literally. I mean, I fucking hope not. But I can't see him lasting more than a couple rounds. I have one of his fights going right now, and here's some stuff I'm noticing. First of all, okay, he keeps a high guard. But every time he throws any punch, including a jab, his other hand just goes away. It's not trying to like catch or parry or raise or anything. His other hand just leaves. It's like, okay, I'm throwing a jab. My right hand is now going over here for no reason. When he punches, he also extends his head. So like his chin goes up when he punches. And he puts himself majorly off balance, just leans as far forward as he possibly can. So I think he's come as far as he has by speed and reflexes, and by the fact that like he's as far as being reactive, he's good. He can counter really quickly. He can see where an opponent has moved his head, and then he could get it there. But man, with the chin up, leaning in, like I just watched him take an uppercut right now. I just watched him try that again, flail his hands out, come in with a looping shot, and chin up, ducking down, and bending at the waist with his chin up, ducking down, and then just take a massive uppercut. Yeah, I mean, it could be fast. Maybe he hits hard, but looping punches are defensive. But I don't really know what else to say about this guy. I don't understand how he even came as far as he did with the lack of fundamentals. His punches, too, look like windmills at times, and not like good windmills. Not like he's throwing, not like Wilder, to where it looks like he's got a bowling ball, the heavy-ass bowling ball, and he's just lobbing it at someone. But more like he just doesn't know how to punch. But I'm sure the awkward style has worked for him against, like, mid-tier competitors and his good reflexes. He probably has a decent chin, I'm guessing. But man, this is not gonna go well for him. I hope he's getting paid bank, because he's getting paid to get knocked out in the first or second round. I will be massively surprised if this goes past 5. Like really, 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 really surprised if this goes past 5. Everything about his style says to me that Triple G will just murder him. So yeah, I mean I guess it's a good tune-up fight. I guess it's a good tune-up fight for Triple G. It'll be nice for his highlight reel, is all I could say about that. So yeah, that does it for the podcast today. There are no MMA fights coming up that I'd really like to break down. I might release a separate. I know I said at the beginning this is going to be every Sunday, but I might still release separate breakdowns for MMA fights that I'm excited about that are a little whiles away. So I could do that for TJ versus Cody. MMA videos will be back. They'll be technique breakdowns instead of fight breakdowns, or if they are fight breakdowns, they'll be like a month or two after the fight. But they will be back. I just need to wait it out. I put out an Ally Quenta video, and that didn't get flagged. But when I used like a bunch of full footage. But when I put out a fight breakdown, even though it was mostly still images, I guess the UFC just does not like that. So don't worry about it. The MMA videos will be back. The right after the fight breakdowns, and those are going away. But everything else will be back to normal. Stay tuned for my breakdown of the war, Hagler versus Hearns, like one of the greatest short fights, if not the greatest short fight in history. And then stay tuned for TJ Dillashaw footwork. We're gonna do master the style of that, as well as Mike Tyson. I'm particularly interested in Tyson's hook. If you go over my video, I mentioned how he liked to shift off of his gazelle punch, which is really cool. So I'm gonna be breaking that down a lot. So yeah, stay tuned for all of that. Hope your Sunday is going well, and happy training.